Good afternoon, and welcome to another Research in Action brought to you by the Division of Research at Florida Atlantic University. Today, we have a slightly different format from our normal Research in Action as we invited a panel of faculty to talk about how puppy love can empower veterans. And I will just turn it over to Juliana Moreno, who will lead today's panel discussion.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Karen. My name is Juliana Moreno, and I'm a research assistant at Canines Providing Assistance to Wounded Warriors, and we're all very happy to be here today for this panel discussion. And I'm going to share my screen so that way you can see what we have. And now I just want to take some time to let the rest of the panel introduce themselves. So Dr. Cheryl, if you could please go ahead and start with us.
Sure. So hi, everybody. My name is Cheryl Krause-Parello, and I am the Director of Canines Providing Assistance to Wounded Warriors at Florida Atlantic University, housed within the Kristine-Lynn College of Nursing. And we're really excited today to speak with you about how animals affect human health, specifically the veterans and their families. And I'm looking forward to an interactive dialogue with the audience too. So as Dr. Scarpinato said, please type your questions in the chat box and we'll be able to get to those at the end of the session. So without further ado, I'd like to let my other panelists introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Beth Pratt. I'm an assistant professor at the Kristine-Lynn College of Nursing at FAU. I'm also an associate investigator at C-P.A.W. I have a lived experience of being in a military family during a deployment, and my dog was really instrumental in supporting me through that. So really my research interests, I love them, sort of focus on the military family, mental health, and also biomarkers that are related to human-animal interaction. And thank you for allowing us to be here today.
Hi there, I'm Dave Hibler. Thank you very much for having me here today. I am a PhD student at Ohio State University. I just finished my master's in public health last summer. I also have worked with Cheryl, Beth, and Juliana and other people at C-P.A.W. on a few research projects involving veterans and their well-being, specifically because I am a veteran. I was a combat medic in the Army, and so I know a little bit about the military and being in a war zone and how that can kind of take its toll on veterans. Thank you very much for having us.
Well, thank you for everyone for introducing yourselves. I just want to clarify, I will be moderating this discussion. So I will kind of lead the flow about how this presentation is going to go. But also, again, as Dr. Krause-Parello had stated earlier, if you have any questions, please leave them in the Q&A box and we'll go back to them later. But for now, I want to start with Dr. Krause-Parello. If you could please tell us a bit about how C-P.A.W. started and what it is and what it's about.
Sure. Thank you, Juliana. Yeah, so C-P.A.W. started in 2013. It was really based on a personal experience. My husband, a Marine veteran, was a first responder in 9/11. And it was that situation that really brought me to C-P.A.W. What happened was he was down at Ground Zero for a good amount of time, about maybe 8 months or more. And every night he would come home after going through the rubble, looking for personal artifacts, trying to give families closure or hope, working side by side by the working dogs. And he would come home every night and he would disrobe in the garage because we didn't know anything about the environmental hazards at that time. I mean, we just knew that he was going down there. He was, doing his service and trying to give back to so many who had suffered. But it was in those moments that he would come home and he would actually just kind of sit quietly with my dachshund Samantha. And it was an amazing experience for me as a nurse to really see how she was affecting him. And almost it felt like when he would pet her and he would sit quietly, I kind of would watch them, from a distance, not to disturb that quiet time. It was like he was petting his trauma away by being with her. And I remember taking that image in my mind and really kind of holding it. And after he had gone through, 9/11 and Ground Zero, he was also up in the Great Kills landfill, again, going through the debris and trying to really provide some sort of closure for some families. And it was just a really traumatic and stressful time. We were living in Staten Island at the time in New York. And I always thought back about how Samantha, who meant so much to me, you know, as a person who always grew up with dogs, but how a person who really didn't have a human animal bond or an opportunity for a dog relationship as a child just bonded so closely with this little dog. And so it was years later, after he finished his tour of duty, that we talked about, you know, what Samantha meant for him during those times when he came home at night. And we were out to dinner one night and we were just talking about, you know, the different things that she had done for him and how she had made him feel. And so we thought, well, if it made you feel, you know, much better and helped you, you know, with the trauma that you were experiencing day in and day out, I'm sure it helps other people. But we didn't really know much about it back then. There was really not a lot of science behind the human animal bond. It's a very new discipline. And we said, well, what could we call this? And we had a little cocktail napkin, which a lot of good ideas come from scratching little things on cocktail napkins when you're out, just having casual conversations, you know, at dinner. And we sketched out C-P.A.W. because of the acronym. We thought, well, it resonates very well with military because that's how most military communicate, is with acronyms. And so we wrote C-P.A.W. and then we said, okay, let's think about Canines Providing Assistance to Wounded Warriors. We thought the idea was great, you know, the name, we thought it was really catchy, but we thought, well, we better vet it with our veteran and military friends just to see if it would resonate with them and if it would kind of make a connection. And we did, and the people that we contacted said they liked the idea. And so I kind of kept that in my back pocket, so to speak, that napkin. And then when I, you know, moved to the University of Colorado in 2013, I started my tenure there, and I met the dean and said, you know, I have this idea. It's called C-P.A.W. I told her a little bit about what I wanted to do and really investigate the human animal bonds for military veterans and their families. You know, is this something that you think I could launch? And she said, why not? Try it. And so I got a nice donation from the Anschutz family. And I was able to start C-P.A.W. at the University of Colorado in 2013. Fast forward, I've been at Florida Atlantic University now for 3 years. I brought the C-P.A.W. initiative with me. And it really is about the human animal bond and looking at ways that we can use alternate and non-pharmacological interventions to support our military who may be struggling with less than optimal mental health, and also to reduce the suicide rate and the suicide ideations in veterans, which we know, you know, unfortunately, there is, you know, approximately, which is probably underreported, 20 veterans a day who take their life by suicide. And, you know, I always say if one veteran takes his life to suicide, it's one too many. And if we can make a difference and save that one person, we've done our job. And so what I'd like to do now is ask Juliana to share a video that we created so you can really understand and hear veterans themselves talk about the power that animals provide for them and how these animals keep them tethered to society. So Juliana, would you mind sharing the C-P.A.W. video?
Yes, of course. Just give me 1 second to move the screen to the video. All right. I'm going to press play now. This is the video.
Go right there. 4 meters that way. Right there. Go.
I've had some tough times. Came close to ending my life.
I got to the point where this wasn't living life, and attempted several times, but never fully completed suicide.
C-P.A.W stands for Canines Providing Assistance to Wounded Warriors. C-P.A.W's research is showing that veterans and active duty military are showing stress reduction when interacting with a canine, whether it's a service dog, a companion animal, or a personal pet.
So I have short-term memory loss. Your friends and people in our lives it's like I'm a broken record, that I repeat things over and over. But a dog doesn't hear it that way. They just love you unconditionally.
Having a dog in my life has dramatically changed how I dealt with my brain injury. I had this invisible disability that no one knew about and no one could see. And as such, it was difficult to associate with people.
We're very excited to look at ways that we can improve and change public policy regarding how service dogs could be a reimbursable medical expense with veterans with PTSD.
She definitely warms my heart and makes me feel like I have a lot of purpose.
A service dog can help veterans with PTSD in many ways. One way they can do that is by helping ground them and bring them back to the present.
Service dog can make or break you. They can pick things up off the floor, they can open doors, they can turn lights on and off, they can bring you your medications or even remind you when to take your medications.
Veterans who feel suicide may be the only answer, they don't have 2 years to wait, and they don't have the $20,000 or $30,000 to actually train these dogs. When a veteran says they need a service dog, they need it now.
Just because you did not serve doesn't mean that you're serving us.
Save other soldiers from suffering. Let them have what I have. A companion, a friend.
She saves my life almost every other day.
Don't thank me for my service, write a check.
Your donation to C-P.A.W will save veterans' lives.
Stay strong, because I'm doing it.
Thank you so much, Juliana, for sharing that video. Every time I watch that video, I still, it still takes my breath away to hear the veterans and, just to feel what they're feeling and their emotions. And I thank them for sharing their stories with us. And if you want to review that video again, it is on our C-P.A.W website, which is on our slide that Juliana will put up. And you're, free to take a look at that. And also, go through the webpage and see, our teams, our local community partners, also the projects that we're working on, our current research and community engagement projects. We're always looking for folks to get involved and help us spread the word on projects that we're working on, and are always looking for people who are interested in volunteering and helping us with this cause. So I'd like to turn it back over to Juliana now and give my fellow panelists some time to speak about their areas of interest when it comes to C-P.A.W and the military and veteran population. So thank you.
Of course, and thank you so much, Dr. Cheryl, for sharing all of that. It was really impactful to hear, and I never get tired of hearing that story personally. But like you said, I want to move on to the rest of the panelists, and I would now like to focus more on the science behind the human-animal bond and what that looks like empirically. So Dr. Beth Pratt, if you could please tell us a bit more about that. Tell us about the science behind the human-animal bond.
Okay, the video also moves me every time, and you can see that there is an effect of the interaction between the vet and the dog. And these potential impacts can be on physical health or mental health, and often a relationship, there's a relationship between dog ownership and, of course, dog walking. So that's one of the obvious physical health benefits. And interesting affiliative behavior such as petting a dog, like you saw the veterans petting their dogs, has been suggested as a mechanism that changes the emotional and physiological conditions for human beings. And it can change many things, and these changes can include increased positive social interactions, social attention, interpersonal interactions, and an improved mood. So research has also provided evidence that these interactions, especially with friendly pets and dogs in particular, may affect the stress response and cause decreases in levels of cortisol, alpha amylase, heart rate, blood pressure, and self-reported fear, perceived stress, and anxiety. So as we talked about, some studies have shown that just petting a dog can increase IgA, and that can help reduce the acute and chronic stress response. Petting a dog has also been shown to increase levels of oxytocin. And some researchers actually believe that most of the effects of human-animal interactions may be mediated by the oxytocin system. And this is a system that plays a role in social bonding. And researchers have also begun to study single nucleotide polymorphisms, which are SNPs, of the oxytocin receptor gene as an addition to looking at oxytocin levels themselves. And specific SNPs are associated with increased human-to-human empathy. But a study has found that there is a significant association between human and animal empathy and the oxytocin receptor gene SNP, homozygous GG SNP individuals, as compared to the heterozygous GA SNP individuals. And this is really interesting because it suggests an association between social behavior and that it may cross species. So other biomarker levels that have shown changes by petting a dog or merely looking at a dog are prolactin, dopamine, beta endorphins, and beta phenylethylamine. And as we stated, it has been linked to human-animal interaction to decrease levels of heart rate and blood pressure, and decreases in cortisol. And some positive benefits to human health may arise directly from the relationship or the companionship offered by the pets, as well as the interactions or even the observations, especially when a person is under stress. The presence of another living being can simply help reduce feelings of loneliness and isolation, as well as reduce depressive symptoms and improve mood. So psychological well-being may be impacted by pets indirectly through the facilitation of interpersonal social contacts. And that can be seen when someone's walking a dog and gets stopped by a stranger who wants to either pet the dog or have a conversation to get to know the dog better.
Well, that's super interesting, especially how you mentioned that the evidence of biomarkers and perceived stress and basically talking about the benefits of what that human-animal bond looks like. But I want to know a bit more. Can you tell us about, now we know about the biomarkers that you've explained, but can you tell us about how are veterans impacted by that bond with their dog? And, not just the biomarkers, but the veterans themselves personally. If you could tell us more about that.
The veterans in the video actually touched on some of that. So with the dog's non-judgmental demeanor, then there's a reciprocity between the human and the dog. It creates a profound bond, and it can help assist veterans during times of uncertainty. Most research on veterans and animals have focused on service dogs, either service dogs that have been trained or service dogs that are being trained. And as they alluded to, service dogs actually have exhaustive training, and they work to perform tasks for an individual with a disability. So especially with PTSD, they may have been trained to calm them or nudge them during an anxiety attack to calm them down. Veterans with PTSD have shown a perceived sense of calm and improvement in sleep due to their service dogs. And the service dogs may also provide them a structure that the military used to offer that they no longer have in day-to-day life. They may also find comfort in caring for the dog and really a sense of purpose that they may not have had since they separated from the military. Okay. A dog can even give them and help them actually with the reintegration into civilian society, because oftentimes it's difficult. There are civilians that don't really understand the military life. So a dog is there to support them through that.
Okay. So given all of that, and you definitely shared about how that's important and how that impacts veterans directly. But now I'm curious, could you tell us a bit more about your research in this area?
Okay, so there has been a lot of research on veterans and dogs and how that impacts the veteran. Veterans who have mental health challenges, especially PTSD, are often supported by their significant other or their family members. So it's also really important to look at military family members and their relationship with their dog, because that can also help them through the times and make them stronger to be able to be better emotional support systems for the veteran. So relationships dynamics can actually change, and a dog can be a positive part of that change. So my current research really focuses on significant others and the relationship with their dog. So they're significant others of veterans who have mental health challenges. And from the interviews that I've done so far, I really have learned that the most important thing is that significant others have created strong bonds with their dog, and they feel that this bond can't be recreated with a person. The bond arises out of this sense of purpose and this desire to care for another living being. And their connection to their dog really increases over time, as one would imagine. For the most part, their pet dog, even if they're not trained, can also sense if they're sad or if they're mad. And their dog tries to comfort them either by lying their head down on their leg or trying to get the person to pet them. Spouses really feel that, unlike humans, dogs are non-judgmental and caring. One person actually described their relationship with their dog as very pure and trusting, because they know their dog wouldn't betray them by gossiping or intentionally ignoring them as another human would. So most spouses really feel that their dog has helped them improve their physical and mental health, as well as that of their veteran spouse, especially right now during COVID, because there's been more social isolation and loneliness.
And I just wanted to echo what Dr. Pratt just said, because we just completed a study with veterans walking shelter dogs and looked at stress reductions in veterans with PTSD. The paper has been published, and we do have information on it on our website. But basically, what our study found was that veterans who had higher PTSD symptoms showed stress reduction through heart rate variability increase while walking with a shelter dog. And it's interesting because, as you were saying earlier, Dr. Pratt, these dogs and these veterans didn't know one another, and they just, the species to species, that they're kind of almost mirroring each other, because we looked at also the stress of the dogs, and the stress of the dogs also, decreased, and because we had measured heart rate variability on the dogs as well. And so that paper's coming out shortly. But it's just really amazing how you can interact with a dog that you don't know, and you can have changes in your biologic and psychosocial outcomes by just simply looking at a dog, petting a dog, talking with a dog. It's just an amazing bond that we're trying to find answers to, of really, why is this happening? And I know, Dr. Pratt, you had mentioned oxytocin, and that, is called a lot of times the puppy love hormone,
Mm-hmm.
the love hormone, oxytocin. And so we're hoping to work on a project upcoming, Dr. Pratt and I, looking at the relationship of oxytocin in the human-animal bond. And so I just wanted to add that about the dog walk study, because it was really a super study, and those shelter dogs are amazing. And one of them did get adopted by one of the veterans, which was super.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, both of you, some of that insight on how the human-animal bond actually has a profound impact on, not just mental health and well-being, but the overall biological influence that just being around a dog can have on veterans, especially when they're dealing with the hardships that can come with, mental health issues that arise after military service. But now I want to move over to David Hibler, because I know that he had mentioned that in our introduction that he is a veteran and he has his own personal experience with, not just as a PhD student, not just in this field of research, but also his own personal story. So David, if you could please share, I would really like to hear about how that experience with you is, how that experience for you is with, you know, living with your dog and being a veteran, and how that's impacted your life.
Thanks, Juliana. Thanks, Dr. Pratt and Dr. Krause-Parello. That's really some interesting information. I've got a couple questions for you guys afterwards. But and you might have seen me laughing a little bit while Dr. Pratt was talking, because some of the things she said were spot on. I can relate from my own life. My dog definitely does not gossip about me. It's one of the most cherished things about him. And now I was a combat medic in the Army. So my duties as a soldier were mostly working with people. I didn't get to work with animals too often, unfortunately. However, when I was stationed in Iraq, I was stationed not very far from a veterinary company. And I was able to see not only how the members of that company got to interact with animals and how that affected their lives, but also in that same location, we were not very far from what I believe Saddam Hussein had set up as a zoo, where there were a lot of animals that were let loose from that, including a lot of different breeds of dogs and cats, and they would wander in and out around the post. Now, some people might think that soldiers are a little bit too rough during a wartime interaction to really be able to give much attention or affection to some non-essential living animals, but that's really far from reality. The demand of our duties, especially during wartime, can sometimes leave that more caring and nurturing aspect of our being starved. And just like any other human being, when we're given the opportunity, we really do want to love and care for and be loved and cared for by others. That sort of connection is essential to just your basic health and well-being. And oftentimes veterans can find that in animals, specifically dogs. These dogs that were part of the zoo that would wander in and off of post, the official direction was to stay clear of them because you didn't know if they had any diseases, fleas, anything else. But unfortunately, people couldn't keep away from those cute puppy dog eyes. And generally, these animals would become unofficially adopted or become mascots of teams or units or things like that. And more often than not, people would become so attached to these dogs, they go through the long and arduous process of quarantining them and officially adopting them and bringing them back to the States. There's several of those here in the country right now. And the connections that the military members formed with these animals could oftentimes be as strong as those that they formed with other members of their units. And these animals became like family. For the veterinary company I was talking about a little bit ago, they took care of a lot of the bomb sniffing dogs and the other working dogs that were part of the military force there overseas. These animals were specially trained and brought there just like the men and women in uniform. And they were treated like such. They were full members of units. And when the unfortunate circumstance arose that one was lost, they were given rights and honors the same as any other soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine would have been. These animals were literally family. They were your brothers in arms. Now, I currently have two dogs. One's an old Labrador Newfoundland mix. He's a little crotchety. His name is Orion. He's about 14 years old and he's starting to have some health problems. He's getting those lab lumps. Right now, all of them are lipomas, but unfortunately we know that eventually someday they're not going to be. And he's my ESA. He was prescribed to me to help me with my PTSD and the related depression, my transition back home, which was a little difficult. My other dog is just turned 4 a couple weeks ago. He's a Dane Mastiff mix, and he is a giant ball of energy that drives Orion crazy. But the thickest thieves, and they love each other very much. So I got Orion because it was suggested to me on my way back home that I get a dog to help with my transition back to normal civilian life. I didn't really understand how having an animal in my life could help, but I've really been astonished at how much it has. Something that I had big problems with when I first got back home and was completely on my own again was keeping a set schedule. I really didn't like being alone, especially at night in the dark. It was just too quiet. And I would oftentimes find myself leaving the TV on and milling around the house, finding odd projects to do until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And when you have to get up at 6 the next day for work or for class, that's not a recipe for success. When I brought Orion into my life, he would help me go to bed on time and keep to a schedule. Still, now I've had him for almost 14 years. He will come and give me a look at a certain time of night, usually between 9 and 10, and say, "Hey, Dad, why aren't you in bed? You know you have to go to sleep now." He doesn't actually say that, but I can tell from his look. And trust me, if you don't go to bed, he gets cranky. But beyond that, if I don't get up in the morning to let him out or to feed him, then there's going to be consequences to pay. And he'll oftentimes wake me up letting me know that he's hungry or that things need to be done. He gives me a reason for coming back home during the day. I've got to walk him, I've got to feed him, I've got to make sure he gets his medications and he gets his exercise. Just like Dr. Pratt says, there's a lot of things that tie these animals into the health and well-being of their owners. And that seems to go doubly true for veterans. He also helps me by not being alone. One of the most difficult parts of coming home was not having my battle buddies around or my squad, not having the noise of all the activity of the post around me all the time. Just being alone in the dark and the quiet, that was by far the worst of it. But he's another body in the room now. When I think I'm hearing something stir in the middle of the night, it's usually him. And just like Dr. Pratt was talking about, that physical contact, it changes your mood. It changes how you're feeling. It can calm you down. Just by having him lay on your lap or by petting him, there's something very powerful in that. Also, having somebody that relies on you. He gives you a sense of purpose. I think that's another point that Dr. Pratt was mentioning, something I was laughing at, because he really does. I would find ways to, not come home or not take care of responsibilities, but with him, I know I've got somebody who's counting on me to come home and be responsible, do the right thing, and take care of him. If I don't feed him, if I don't let him out, if I don't walk him, nobody's there to do it. I have to do it for him. I don't think I'll ever be without a dog in my life again. That's how much it's impacted me. Orion has done an incredible job, and it amazes me how smart he is and how much he understands. Now, there are some scars that will never go away completely, but Orion has helped me to heal to a point where I am so much better off now than I would have been without him. He has been there for me in ways that I don't know if I could have ever asked another human being to have been there for me. And no one will ever be able to replace his effect on my life. I've seen how much he and other animals like him mean to soldiers, not only in war zones, but I've also experienced firsthand how much they can help us heal after we get back home. I count myself very lucky to have Orion in my life and to be able to work with people like Cheryl, Beth, and Juliana, and all the other people at C-P.A.W. who understand how important these relationships can be, specifically to veterans. I know how powerful and therapeutic having a canine in your life can be. Like I said before, from here on out, I don't think I'll ever be without a dog in my life. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you so much, David, for sharing that. It's incredibly touching, and it definitely adds to, the humanity behind what the purpose of this research is. Like, this is why we do it, and this is why it's important. And thank you for being, sharing, some of your vulnerability with us, so that way we could better, I guess, take into account why we have to keep doing this and why we're going to keep moving forward with doing this. And with that being said, that's why C-P.A.W. is important. That's why we're here. And that's also why we have, this page up for everyone to see. So that way, if they want to learn more on our website, which is right here on the screen, nursing.fau.edu/C-P.A.W. We talk about the research that we do, and we also have other resources, such as how people could get involved in not just research, but also community engagement projects, and how they could be more connected to the community through resources that help veterans or resources that help get in touch with animals for adoption and things like that. So if anyone else on the panel would like to share anything relevant to, the initiative and everything we've been discussing today on the human-animal bond, on the work of C-P.A.W. and what we're looking forward to, please feel free to take the time to do that. But yeah, I just want to thank all of you for sharing all the information you offered today, because it really was very impactful, and it just reinforces time and time again that this is urgent. And this is why we need to keep moving forward with this. So if anyone has anything to say, please feel free to take the floor. And after that, we can move on to some Q&As and some closing statements.
Well, I personally had more of a sciencey question to ask Dr. Pratt and Dr. Krause-Parello, but I noticed we had a few questions pop up in the Q&A.
All right. So yes, thank you, David, for pointing that out. We do have some questions in the Q&A. I see from Julie Lauderbo, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. She asks, are there certain types of breeds that have performed better for veterans with PTSD?
So I'll start off on that question. Feel free, David and Beth, to chime in on that. So, it depends really on the person. A lot of the dogs that you'll see that are service animals for post-traumatic stress disorder are usually Golden Labrador mixes. That's if they're bred from puppyhood, because a lot of the organizations that do breed their own dogs will breed them for their temperament. But you'll also see other dogs that are just as suitable for veterans who have PTSD symptoms. For example, on our C-P.A.W.W webpage, you'll see a husky that is an actual service dog for our military veteran consultant, Lyndon Vallone. And so it really just depends on the person and also the bond that the person has with the dog. You'll also see shepherds also can be a dog that would be utilized for veterans with PTSD. But then I've also seen dogs, small lap dogs, for people who really just want to have someone come and have someone sit on their lap. And so there are veterans that choose to work with smaller breeds. So it really is up to the person and the person's symptoms to really connect, their need. And the way that you can do that is really working with a highly skilled trainer to help you select the dog that's best for you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Krause-Parello. So we also have a few other questions. This one is more of a clarification question that anyone could chip in and chime in to help answer. And someone's asking, does C-P.A.W.W provide dogs for veterans? And to answer that very quickly, the answer is no. The entire point of C-P.A.W.W is more as a health research initiative to learn about how the human-animal bond impacts veterans. But Dr. Pratt or Dr. Krause-Parello, or even David, if you have anything you would like to add to that, please feel free to, chime in.
Yeah, so just like what Juliana said, C-P.A.W.W doesn't provide dogs, but we're a resource for veterans who are interested in seeking a service dog, an emotional support dog, or even a companion animal. We're partnering in South Florida with some local shelters too, and looking at programs where we can develop a training module where veterans would train dogs with a professional trainer and then adopt one of the shelter dogs in our local community. But we do get inquiries from veterans across the United States because we do have a reach outside of South Florida as well. And what we like to think of ourselves as is really a liaison between the service dog agencies and the veteran community. And so we try to, depending on location, give information to the veterans so they can seek out organizations in their respective areas that could possibly work with them to provide them with the service they need.
If you happen to be close to a large college campus, there's also an organization that used to be called Pets for Vets. I believe they've changed their name to Pets for Heroes here in the last year or two, but they also try to help get service members in touch with service animals as well to their need, but it can be a long process.
Yes, it can be a long process. And I think the mission of C-P.A.W.W and the research that we're doing is to gather more, not only qualitative, but quantitative information so that it will help push policy forward and veterans may receive either a service dog or emotional support animal quickly, because it is a couple years sometimes before they can receive one.
All right, well, thank you. So we still have a few more questions coming in. We have one from Alexis Baker, and the question is, do you ever do webinars for veterans who want to learn more about how a service dog could help them and how to apply to an ADI organization or owner training?
So we have not done that yet. Our team is small and mighty. We do a lot of work with a limited crew. So we're always looking for people to get involved and help us develop new programs and initiatives. So I think it's a fabulous idea. And, you know, ADI is one of the organizations that we're close with and that we are partnering with on a grant that we just submitted to NIH. And we do work with a lot of the ADI organizations. And so it really is bringing people with like minds together to put something like that forward. But we're happy to get involved and to assist any way we can. It's just a matter of bandwidth and how much we're doing at C-P.A.W. That's why we're always looking for additional support, as well as folks that are interested in volunteering and even people from the university community to just get involved to help us make a difference in veterans' lives, especially those struggling with PTSD and suicide ideation. So I really appreciate that idea. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I actually really like that idea. And also, like Dr. Cheryl said, we are tiny, but we are mighty. We, with what we have, we do try our best. And I like to think that we have done a lot given the amount of people we have on board. We're all really passionate about what we do, but you know, there are some limitations to only having so few people working on this. But we are trying our best, and you know, thank you for offering some suggestions and for that insightful question, because it is very important. And we have some more questions coming in. We have a question from Julie Langtot. She says that with new research coming out, will dogs used for PTSD be seen as essential to veteran well-being? And also that she's also asking, will our research aid in accepting PTSD dogs as service dogs?
So the second part of your question, Julianne, maybe just repeat the first part again, please.
Okay, so I'm sorry. Okay, so the first part is, will dogs used for PTSD be seen as essential to the veteran's well-being?
So I think, David, maybe you could answer that better because your lived experience.
So it's kind of a multi-level question there. So I believe they are currently in the process of being seen as more essential. We've gone through a transition in this country where animals, companion animals, emotional support animals were given certain prestige, and there's been a little bit of backlash from that, from some of the abuse of it. Not so much in the veteran community, thank goodness. I mean, I haven't seen a veteran try to take a peacock on an airplane or anything like that. But I'm not sure exactly what kind of specific training there is for a dog to be labeled as a PTS dog, as that's above an emotional support animal. I believe they're equivalent. And if that's the case, then yes, there are some things when it comes to, I believe, the Americans with Disability Act, where those dogs are seen as essential, like you can't be restricted for housing or things like that because you have an emotional support animal. But they are becoming more stringent in the allowances they give them as when it comes to public transit and things like that. And I think the goal of a lot of our research is to identify how essential these dogs really are to the health and well-being of veterans, and so that we can help push policy that will make exceptions for veterans who have these animals, so that they don't necessarily have to give up the beneficial effects they have in certain situations, if that makes sense. And Alexis, if you do happen to have any opportunities for us, our email is right there on the screen right now. We'd be happy to hear from you.
And you're right about research. It's really important for future research to have larger sample sizes and to have longitudinal studies to be able to give more information and more backing to the fact that service dogs or emotional support animals or companion animals are beneficial to, mental health and well-being.
And also to continue answering the following question, which is, will research aid in accepting PTSD dogs as service dogs? I'd also like to add that we have discussed and looked into psychiatric service dogs, and psychiatric service dogs are not limited to only helping with PTSD, but also other possible mental health issues that could require definitely be helped with the assistance of a service dog, but they definitely require more specialized training. Sometimes it could be more expensive and it could take longer. But that is an option that exists. It is definitely more difficult to attain. And from what we've done our research in and what we've reviewed in existing literature, it is a challenge that is difficult, especially for veterans, because, you know, like our video showed on the website, they don't have $20,000 or $30,000 or 2 years or more to wait around to get that dog. They need it right now. So there's a whole wide range of challenges that comes with that. But PTSD dogs as service dogs, it's more like psychiatric service dogs that exist to help with PTSD. I hope that helps answer your question. We also have some more questions coming in. And this one is from Miriam Campo. She asks, has there been any research done if a veteran having a dog with them in combat reduces PTSD?
So I'm not
That's a
specifically.
great, yeah, that's a great question, David, but I don't think there is anything out there because, you know, when you're in the military, it's very difficult to really conduct research, especially if you're a civilian. And so I haven't seen anything come out of the DoD that looked at the service dog for an active duty mission. I don't know, David, have you heard anything like that?
I haven't heard of specific research in that area. I do know from personal experience that having support or feeling like you have strong support for you while you're in a combat zone or in a war zone, it does help reduce PTSD because those who don't feel like they're supported do generally experience more mild symptoms from it. I'm not sure exactly how we would be able to study that, to be honest. We might be able to look into other traumatic instances of people who happen to have dogs with them and see if that reduces, if those populations have lower rates of PTSD. However, in a combat zone, things can be so chaotic that having a dog with you might increase the amount of trauma that's done if there's something were to happen to that dog. So I don't know, it might be a balancing act there.
Yeah. I know that I haven't heard of any research specifically that answers that question, but Dr. Krause-Parello, I know that you did an aeromedical evacuation research. I know it wasn't in combat, but maybe you want to talk about that and how that helped veterans, because there were some interesting results from that.
Yeah. So we did a study a couple of years ago, and we looked at the stress of aeromedical evacuation. So people that were being airlifted from a combat zone brought back to the United States, and they were brought back to Joint Base Andrews. And we had a dog therapy team. So it wasn't a service dog, but we had a dog handler team actually greet the flight. And so when the active duty military, came off the flight, we measured their stress and through psychosocial and biologic measures over that night, because they stay at the staging facility for less than 24 hours when they're aerovac'd, and then they go to their home base. And so during that time period, we did multiple measures when they landed at the Joint Base Andrews till they left the next morning to their base. And that information is published, and we do have information on that on our website about that. And we did find that the active duty military who had increased stress did show stress reduction in biologics and their psychosocial measures during that window when they were with us at Joint Base Andrews. So it's kind of active duty, but not, in an active duty military base camp, across the sea, but it was taking people from an active duty base camp and then seeing what their stress level was when they arrived. And it was very interesting. And we had a large amount of people who participated, and the study was well received. And if you want further information about that, we can certainly give you the reference for that study. We have 2 references from that and done a few presentations. But we went back and we followed up with the folks who, enjoyed the pet therapy and asked them, about the experience. And overwhelmingly, the people who participated in the study said that they would like to see that in more transition bases across the United States. So it's something that we were looking into.
Thank you for elaborating on that. I still think that's so interesting, and I'm really happy that we're getting some very insightful questions. So we have another one. This one, I will leave it up to the experts to answer because I am not too familiar with this, but the question is, do VA hospitals allow dogs?
Dogs, yes. Companion animals, generally not.
So
And
usually
maybe,
service dogs.
yeah, maybe we should elaborate more on what kinds of dogs, because dogs in general, it could be a yes or no question, you know, such as service dogs, companion dogs, emotional support dogs. They all have different categories for what they're allowed to do. So if anyone wants to maybe elaborate on that, that could be helpful, I think.
So the service animal, as Dr. Pratt had mentioned earlier, is really trained to do something specific for a specific individual. Emotional support dog does have training, but it's not as highly skilled as a service animal, and it does provide emotional support and comfort. And as David Hibler had mentioned earlier, some emotional support dogs do have some allowances with the Americans with Disabilities Act and are allowed to have special housing. So if, for example, if there was a restriction for dogs in an apartment complex and you had, they call them ESAs, emotional support animal, you can have that animal live with you in that building. You can't be restricted to have that animal. As service animals can go anywhere people can go, and there's no restriction at all. And then obviously companion animals would just be like your personal animal, personal pets, as some people call them, companion animals. And so there are 3 different tiers of dogs, and each tier gives them specific access to different things. But the VA does provide service animals for veterans. Right now, it's mostly for mobility and hearing and vision impairment. Right now, there's not a reimbursement for veterans with that need a psychiatric service dog. They're working on that, and there's a lot of good things that are coming out of the VA when it comes to looking at how we can impact veterans' health and wellness using psychiatric service dogs. So it's just a matter of time, I think, before the VA will be offering some sort of support. There's a few acts and legislation that are moving forward regarding this issue, specifically veterans who are seeking out dogs to help them with their mental health and wellness. So to come, I think, in the near future.
I think it's also important to note that service dogs, when they do go into the VA or anywhere else they're let into, they must be well-trained, under control. They can't lunge at people or bark a lot. So that is something that must be there as well. The training and good behavior.
Yeah, so we're getting a few more questions in about if there's any VA hospitals that allow the visitations with dogs. As stated before from the panelists, service dogs are allowed any place that a person is allowed. Emotional support animals, it's a bit more difficult. I don't know about therapy dogs. We have Susie Wong asking if she could visit with 2 or 3 of her dogs at a hospital, and if there are any VA hospitals that she could visit with her dogs. So again, it depends on, I guess, their certifications and their qualifications as dogs. Therapy dogs could be a bit more difficult. They also go through their own specific type of training to be led into certain facilities, and those facilities will need approval from specific facilities, even if it is a therapy dog, but service dogs can go anywhere. And as mentioned before, emotional support animals, it depends on this location. And companion animals, you can't just take them anywhere. It depends on what the facility allows. And someone also brought up a good point that there are some programs for veterans to work with horses as therapy, for equine therapy. So I know that we have a bit of, we've done a little bit of research on that, if I'm correct, Dr. Cheryl. Maybe you would like to talk about that as well, or I'll leave that up to you.
Yeah, I haven't done any research with equine therapy, but there is some published studies to show benefits of not only riding, therapeutic riding, but also just being in the presence of a herd. We had a farm in Colorado that we would visit where they would have horses that weren't saddled up or anything. They were just in the corral, and we would go with veterans from our group and just watch the horses and the veterans kind of almost mirror each other and kind of understand each other. And it was so amazing because you have these huge animals, you know, in this, it's almost like they're mesmerizing you. I don't know, Beth, I see you shaking your head. I think you kind of read and understand that impact. We have not, or I have not studied the impact, but I've seen it firsthand, and it really is empowering.
Yes, horses are very sensitive creatures, and they sort of, you feed off the horse, and it's very in therapeutic situations, like you said. You could have riding therapy, but a lot of times it could just be one-on-one therapy with a horse incorporated, and they are very calming.
Great. Thank you for answering those questions. And to start wrapping it up, we also have a question from Jessica Bimmerman about how she could provide information about her service dog for veterans organization, a C-P.A.W. And that's actually a great way to sort of end this panel in saying that if you just look at our website or contact us through our email, you can connect with us on Facebook. Again, just reach out to us. We're always on our email all the time. Our website has several resources for how else you can get involved with C-P.A.W. through either community engagement projects or any research you might be interested in. You could also connect with us on Facebook. And here's the Facebook link below for you to, to copy and look at our posts and how we get involved with the community. But if you want to reach us directly, the best way is usually through our email. You could just share some of your contact information, share about what you would like to do. But also, this isn't just for connecting with organizations. This is also a great way to just connect with us directly if you have questions about any research or how you want to get involved with the projects that we might have going on, or just learning about how you can help the initiative and how you can get involved to continue helping our veterans in the community. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. We're all just here trying to help veterans and improve their health and well-being, especially through the support of the human-animal bond, which is what we're all passionate about. And we're really happy to have been able to share this panel so that way we can share our knowledge with you. So again, you could just refer to these resources here, the website, the email, and our Facebook page. And we'd be happy to connect with anyone and everyone who is interested with us. So if anyone has any other further questions or further inquiries, please again refer to our Facebook, our email, and our website. Besides that, I'd like to thank everyone so much for coming and for letting us have the time to share our knowledge with you. And thank you to our panel of experts, Dr. Pratt, Dr. Krause-Parello, and Mr. David Hibler for all your insight. And it was really great to have this panel with you. And I'm really glad we did that together. And, I'm looking forward to uncovering more knowledge and discovering more about how we could help our veterans through the use of dogs and the human-animal bond, and looking more into the human-animal interaction science to see what we could do to keep helping our veterans. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Juliana. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.